Hi, my name is Chris Pagan. I'm a distinguished technical marketing engineer working in the data center group inside Cisco. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the automation options that are available to you for programmatically accessing a multi-site orchestrator. So what I'm going to talk about are options for you to either create new configuration, modify new configuration, or delete configuration, or retrieve configuration from MSO. So the standard CRUD operations. Now, MSO uses a REST API. So it's a strict client-server model. The client is a pure HTML-based front end, which stores no data locally. There's no database. There's no fat client. Everything that it pushes or retrieves is done through REST API backend calls. So that means that you can interact with raw JSON. You can use, for example, Postman, JavaScript, any language that you like, and take a look at what the user interface is doing, for example, to create your own queries. So we're going to start with this option and we'll see how it works, and then we'll move on to other options. So let's explore what the UI is doing with the REST API. So if I bring up the user interface, if I want to see which kind of requests it's making to the backend, I have to bring into focus my developer tools. So I press F12 and that brings up the debugger console. You go to network, and for example, if you click on tenants, retrieving this list was made through a REST API call. So if I click on the first one, you can see that the user interface sent a GET request to that API endpoint, so /tenants, and it received a list of tenants in JSON, each tenant containing different attributes that are represented in the user interface. So this means that, of course, you could take that into Postman and send a GET request, and you will get the exact same data, right? So you can then write the logic to extract the ID of each tenant and proceed with getting the schemas, for example. So if you get the schemas, you can make a call. And if you want to see how a schema is linked to a tenant or a template, then you have to correlate the requests together. So what I mean by correlate the requests together, you'll see exactly in a bit. Let me clear that. And now let me go to one of the tenants. And you see, for example, that this tenant is linked to specific sites. Well, the request now is slightly different. So if you look at what happened at debugger tool, the request goes to a unique ID. Well, that is the ID of a tenant. So each tenant has a unique ID. And if you want to query certain attributes of that tenant, you have to go and specify the ID of the tenant that you're interested in. And what you're going to get here is, for example, the site associations. And the sites themselves have site IDs. So you can actually use them to then make queries on the sites or modify them. So what you're going to see here is that all of the objects in multi-site orchestrator's backend are stored with a unique ID. This differs from what you may be familiar with in ACI, which is a distinguished name concept. There is no such concept in multi-site orchestrator. It's a relational database. It is not a graph database like with ACI. So what that means is if you want to use Postman, the difficulty, if you will, or the task of correlating these IDs with the descriptions and the names is on you. So you have to build the logic for that. So what you may be wondering is, well, how do I find out which methods are available on which endpoints? Is there a list of the endpoints? Do you publish a schema? Yes, we do. The API in multi-site orchestrator adheres to the Open API documentation format, which means that we can use Swagger. So if you click on the gear icon and you look at API docs, this brings up a page, which is the Swagger API documentation. And there's a list of categories here that pertain to different angles of the API. For instance, suppose you want to authenticate first. Well, you would go to the user API, you launch, and this is going to bring into focus all of the API endpoints that pertain to user operations, creating users, deleting users, modifying users, getting audit records, changing the roles and permissions, LDAP APIs, login domains, but also, as you would expect, authentication APIs. If you want to log in, you should know that MSO uses a bearer token So that's a token you are expected to retrieve and then pass into your subsequent queries to the API. Let's take a look at this. If you click on the API endpoint itself, you get an example of the value that you're supposed to pass to the endpoints over here with the method, and a list of response codes and contents depending on the outcome of the operation you just performed. But what I do like about Swagger is there is a try it out button. So you can actually click here, you can modify this. So let's actually log in with the wrong password and see what happens. I will remove the domain ID and I will execute. You'll see what got sent, and what I receive is essentially, oh, here there's a malformed body. So I must have made a mistake actually in the body somewhere. Yes, I have an extra trailing comma, which I'm going to remove and do it again. And this time we're going to get a 401 for invalid credentials. If I was successfully authenticated, I would get the bearer token. So I can do it now. So if I do this and I execute, you'll see that you do receive a 201 this time with permissions and the token. Again, if you write your own automation suite in Postman, JavaScript, Python, Go, whatever language takes your fancy, you have to deal with retrieving the token, passing it in subsequent requests, and so on and so forth. Speaking about languages, there is a lightweight SDK which is available to you on github.com/datacenter/multi-site orchestrator Python. So right here, right? Data center, multi-site orchestrator Python. What this is a very lightweight SDK in Python, which allows you to instantiate an object which abstracts your MSO. So you log in with credentials, which you can store in a file or environment variables you decide. You authenticate, and if you authenticate successfully, then this takes care of retrieving the bearer and passing it onto all the subsequent requests that you make. You can simply then invoke the methods on the endpoint like this. So if you want to get all the sites, all you have to do is RC, which is the REST client, .get, that's the HTTP verb, and then the API endpoint. If you take a look at the example in the GitHub repo, it's as simple as this. So if you do Python get sites, you'll get all the sites over here. There's multiple examples for posting data. So if you want to create a new user, for example, you'll see that first the code retrieves a list of roles and goes through all of them until it finds the one that matches power user. When it does, it extracts the unique ID of the object, and it passes that ID as a parameter to the attribute role ID in that JSON payload, which is then sent as a post request to /users, and that creates a user. So I encourage you to explore that repo and the examples to find out what you can do with this. You'll be also interested to know that what the UI does most of the time when you make a modification is called the put method. So let me make a change over here. For example, I go to Ansible. So that, of course, caused data to traverse the network. So I'm going to clean that and enter something here. You'll see that what happens is the API that was used is the tenants and the unique ID and a put method. So what the user interface does is it uses a lot of put requests. What does it put? Well, the entire body of the tenant over here, and it changes the description. So it sends the whole thing, if you will, with a delta included directly in the payload. So if the tenant has, say, 1,000 lines, then the UI will send 1,000 lines with one line modified. There's better. And what the backend API supports is the patch method. The patch method is a standard HTTP verb, just like get, put, delete. It's called patch. And there's an example here in the Python SDK where we patch a template. So what the patch allows you to do is specify just the delta and not the entire configuration. So imagine that in this example we have a schema, and what we'd like to do is change or add, in this case, as you can see from the operation, a static path binding. Well, all you have to do is simply send this patch payload, if you will, to the right URI, to the right API endpoint, which is over here. You can see the patch method, to the URL, which is constructed from the code over here, and that will then modify just what you want. Again, you don't have to guess how this works because this is documented. So for example, if I wanted to find out how to patch something, I can go back over here, look at the API docs, and I know that in the schema, for example, I can patch. So if I go here, you'll see that some of the API endpoints have a patch available. And when you go to patch, we'll tell you exactly what to specify. So the path, and then what you have to do for add operations and replace operations. And again, you can try it out, right? So this is the patch API support with complete examples here. So very powerful if you want to reduce the length of your code, or if you want to manipulate smaller chunks of data from the API. That's the patch method. Okay, good. So we've covered the REST API, how the UI uses it, and how you can use it with a higher level programming language. Well, what if you're not a programmer? What if you are used to a different tool such as Ansible or Terraform? Well, good news, because there is an Ansible option and a Terraform option for automating MSO. In terms of Ansible, we have 30 plus modules, and we have a Terraform provider, which is also available. Now, Ansible it probably doesn't need much introduction. Open source tool, also commercially available from Red Hat if you would like a supported version. Can manage a very wide range of system, which is what makes it quite popular. So for example, with Ansible, you can manage virtual machines, you can manage cloud instances and multi-site orchestrator. Right, good. So how do you use Ansible with multi-site orchestrator? Well, as you might know, Ansible has a small change of operation in the 2.9 and 2.10 version. And it essentially, rather than containing all of the code from all of the vendors when you download Ansible, this model is moving away in favor of a lighter core, which is completely extensible, very much like Terraform, by the way. So we're looking at this over here, right? Multi-site orchestrator with 30 plus modules for MSO. And what I was talking about is this. So essentially, we have something called Ansible collections. What is an Ansible collection? Well, we move from this model where everything comes in from the main package to something where you have this lightweight core, which can then be extended by loading these modules. These are called collections. So Cisco has a series of collections, and I'm going to show you where they are, and I'll show you how to install these collections as well. So a collection is essentially a lot of vendor modules. So all of the roles, the modules, the utilities, documentation, everything that the vendor provides is now packaged into a collection. The way you install a collection is you have Ansible 2.9, is you use Ansible Galaxy Collection install. This is the namespace and then the path. So Cisco ACI or Cisco.MSO, and then you simply run your playbook. How do you find out what collections are available in the Cisco namespace? Well, you go to that link. It's galaxy.ansible.com/Cisco. And here you'll see, for example, ACI, ASA, DCNM, Intersite. And you will find in the middle MSO. If you click on MSO, you'll have the versions that exist, how to install it, a full README file with an example over there. And once you've installed it, it's very easy to use. So I'm going to try now, right? So if I go to Ansible MSO, and let's take a look at what I have. So I've installed it. So again, what I've done to install it is simply type Ansible Galaxy, and then you say install the name of the collection. So for example, Cisco MSO, it's already installed. But if it was not, I would simply do for example, cisco.aci. So collection install Cisco ACI. That one I have not installed yet, so you'll see what it looks like when you install a brand new collection. So it pulls down all the code from Galaxy, and then you're essentially good to go. So what do you do next? Well, you create a playbook based on an inventory. So here I have my inventory. So we have MSO over here, and then the IP address, user, and password. That's the inventory. And I have here a create tenant. So if we take a look at what that does, I have my host, connection local, and then collections. And I point here to my collections right there. Then I define a YAML anchor block over here, which I'm going to reuse with that funny syntax. So this simply defines a block of variables, which I'm going to reuse throughout the rest. This is coming from the inventory. This is Jinja substitution at play. And then I have my tasks. So one of them is creating a tenant. So I call the module MSO tenant. I literally copy paste, if you will, this into there. And then the tenant name and the tenant state, those are coming from either the inventory or from the command line. And we'll see how that works in a second. And then what I do next is I associate a template to that specific tenant. So you can see here the tenant comes back again. So it's the same tenant. The schema is brand new and the template is brand new, right? So how would I use this? I would use this like so. So I would do Ansible playbook, inventory this, create, and then extra variable. One is called tenant state, which is present, and one is called tenant name, which is test Ansible. All right, so we're creating the tenant and then the schema. What I've done is I've just done different options here. Oh, I think this already exists. Yes, existing template. Well, let's take a look at what happened. So this created a new tenant. So if I go to dashboard tenants, we have test Ansible. And if I delete it, so if I go back here and I just change, for example, the state from present to absent, it's going to delete the tenant. That's it, it's done. So if I reload this page, right, so that tenant is gone from the backend database. So that's Ansible. There's a series of examples on different locations. There is a good example here. So if you go to that URL, which is github.com/LHERCOT, there's an Ansible ACI webinar. And when you go here, you have a series of branches which essentially show you step by step, if you will, how to deal with MSO. So create a tenant in MSO, for example. So if you click on that one and you go to MSO, you have the example here which uses the MSO tenant. The next step is a branch. So you go to add schema, and then this builds on top of what we just went through. So this will then go and add a schema to this. And then if you want to patch the schema or modify the schema and create VRFs and EPGs, well, then you go to branch number 7, and that keeps building on top of what we just built. So this creates the VRF, the BD, and application network profile, and then a list of EPGs over here. So this is a very good option, very simple to use. That brings us to the next automation option, which is the Terraform provider. So there is a Terraform provider right here for MSO. This is not upstreamed yet, which means that you have to build this. So you have to be familiar with how to build a Terraform plugin. This is documented in the HashiCorp website. So if you go over there, you'll see how to do that. This is not extremely difficult, but it's not trivial either, meaning that you're going to need some practice probably if you've never done it before. But once you have all the prerequisites, it's essentially a walk in the park, but you need to fulfill all the prerequisites and install Go and have the right path for Go, essentially. That's the biggest thing you're going to have to worry about. Then you build the provider. Once you have built the provider, you Terraform init as you normally would with any kind of HashiCorp plan. And once that's done, you will call provider MSO here, and then use the resources or the data from that provider, just like you normally would with any Terraform provider. There's examples also in the directory here, which you can peruse at your own pace. There's a lot of them, as you can see. So it's quite complete as well in terms of coverage. What we do encourage is, because this is all open source, please use the issues tab to provide feedback or report problems that you are running into, and we will tackle them as we see them coming. So what I have here is a list of links that you can go to. So for example, the one that you want to go to is the Ansible Galaxy link, which we went through. It's galaxy.ansible.com/Cisco. The providers for Terraform are over here. ACI, don't worry about it. This is upstream now. MSO is not yet, but it will be in the future. The demo code is over there. And then we have more links over here. So there's a blog post over there, why ACI or why MSO with HashiCorp. And there's YouTube videos that walk you through comprehensive demos of these automation options. Thank you for watching.